Habari gani, Mainduga Nadada. This is your brother, your elder, General Abu Amin Ra. My brothers and sisters, I want to introduce to some of you and just remind the others of you of a book written by yours truly entitled When God Was Black. This book is still available. Amazon, or you can go to Google and type in When God Was Black by John Brinson, and various sellers will appear before you. When God Was Black by John D. Brinson. My brothers and sisters, I just want to provide a wee bit more evidence for you that the Egyptians, the Kemetans, were indeed a solid African people. In chapter 2 of this book, there's a chapter entitled Era of Totemism. You see, my brothers and sisters, we must do more reading. There's a lot of knowledge, a lot of information, a lot of historical facts that are hidden beneath the words in ancient books. Now, let me quote something to you from this book that demonstrates to you, with all the other evidence that's provided by John Henrik Clarke, Joseph Ben Jacquemin, Ben Van Sertima, and a host of other Black intellectuals. Well, let me quote from this book here for you to prove to you again that the Egyptians, the Kemetans, were an African people. Quote, in ancient times, it appears at one interval in the stage of human development, we were unaware of the role the male played in the reproduction of children. This is a period when a tribe or band of migrating Africans became trapped behind an ice sheet during one of the interglacial periods in what would later become known as Europe. This was one of the periods when Africans were in the process of spreading civilization throughout the world. In spreading their civilization, they also dispersed their concepts of supernatural powers. One of these concepts was the underlying spiritual reality of all physical entities and phenomena. White anthropologists term this animism, because animism is the basis to the teaching of Christianity. In Genesis of the Christian Bible, we are informed that God spoke the word into the world into being. That his words, let there be, which are spirit, caused the creation that was physical. This is an indication. Listen to me now. This is an indication of some sort of connection with animism, and by extension, the ancient black man. It has been suggested by some scholars that during this period, the role of the male parent was unrecognized, and consequently women were considered the sole producers of children with the aid of a spirit that resides in an animal, tree, or some other place, and enters a woman through the head, ear, or some other point. In this belief, humans became the embodied spirits of various animals and plants, totems, in other words, masquerading in human form. These impregnating spirits were aspects of what was defined as God, or the supernatural, in the worldview of the believers in animism. These earliest of human groups of Africans were constructed of the mother and her descendants, because this was the only line of descent known. The aspects of the spiritual reality were symbolized in totemism. Each grouping of people consequently had their own specific totem by which they were identified. Alexander Goldenweiser informs us of the enormous area where the ancient believers in totemism reside. Totemism is one of the most widespread institutions of primitive society. It is found in North America in several wide-flung areas. As our knowledge of South America increases, totemism there seems to be equally common. It is encountered in Africa throughout the enormous area south of the Sahara and north of the desert of the Kalahari in India. We again discover it in numerous tribes. Here in a crude or perhaps moribund form in Australia, totemism is practically universal, and it is found in function, or at least in traces, in several of the island clusters of Melanesia. That's taken from Alexander Goldenweiser's Totemism, Reader in Comparative Religion, an Anthropological Approach, edited by William Lesser, 1958. That's page 223. Because women were considered the sole producers of life, they were viewed as intermediaries with the supernatural in influencing the hunt, the reproduction of animals, and etc. Later, the production of crops by the other members of her clan. In this capacity, she became the object of veneration as a fertility goddess in the reproduction and production of life, which can be attested by the many Madonna-like statuettes, carvings, and paintings of her found throughout the ancient world. God being worshipped and portrayed as a black woman precedes the portrayal in artifacts indicating worship of an anthropomorphic God as a black man. We have evidence of this being the case. We know the motherhood was factually established before fatherhood. We have evidence the ancient black female was revered and worshipped as what appears to have been a goddess of infertility rituals. These goddesses later evolved into Queen Isis of Egypt. If the Egyptians were a Caucasian or Asian people, how do we account for the many totems they utilized in connection with their gods? Note the many gods with human bodies and human heads and animal heads in the Egyptian pantheon. These were quite simply totemic. That famed and authoritative Egyptologist E.A. Wallace Burge left us the following information. There's no evidence that the Egyptians of the New Stone Age had invented the art of writing, but there's abundant proof that they could draw pictures of the symbols of their totems and sacred animal objects. We can conclude from the assertion of J.G. Frazier that the Egyptians could not have been either Caucasoid or Mongoloid, but must have been Negroid, and consequently their projections of the images of the gods and goddesses were depictions of African men and women, unquote. That's taken from page 31 to 35 of the book When God Was Black. And this is more evidence that the Egyptians had their beginnings in Africa. They were Africans, Kemetans, black people who originated in the valley of the Mountain of the Moon, near Mount Kilimanjaro and several other historical mountains. The Egyptians were black without a shadow of a doubt. My people, you need to get your copy of When God Was Black. This book not only tells you about the great civilizations of Africa, it also tells you how we can regain our minds back that we lost in Africa. Through the Atlantic slave trade, through the Arab slave trade. We have been through it, my brothers and sisters. Let's bring this insanity to a halt. Get your copy today. When God Was Black by John Brinson. Peace and hotep to you, my brothers and my sisters.